Yep. Good afternoon and welcome to this very special edition of Talk Today this afternoon, which is a continuation of our discussion this morning, and it is a constitutional radio roundtable today, the 24th of July 2019, celebrating 60 years of Constitution in the Cayman Islands. We want to welcome you back to our discussion. We had a very enlightening, hopefully educational discussion this morning. The feedback that we've been getting from the public so far, from our listeners and viewers, has been extremely positive, and there is certainly quite an appetite out there for more of this as well. And there are locations where much of the information that we shared with you can be found, including the website for the Constitutional Commissioners as well. And we will continue to share as much as we can with you. We have in the studio this afternoon my co-host again, Dr. Steve McFeel, along with Mr. Gilbert McLean, former member of the Legislative Assembly, former minister as well. We will also have the presence of the Honorable Mayor Lawrence, who will be with us. We will also be graced with the presence of former leader of government business, the Honorable D. Kurt Tibbetts. And he has really, really insightful information as far as the constitutional negotiations which resulted in our 2009 Constitution order. He will be with us also this afternoon. Also coming to join us will be Mr. Vaughn Carter, who is the chairperson of the Constitutional Commission here in the Cayman Islands. What we promised that we would be sharing with you this afternoon will be the constitutions, the other constitutions that we got, and some that we didn't get. Some of those that we got will include amendments to those constitutions as well. And we will start with the 1960 Constitution, which appears to be, which is really an amendment to the 1959 Constitution to make other provisions there as well. Then we will also look at the 1962 Constitution, 65, 1972, the 84, 87, 92, 93, 98 amendments, 2003 amendments, 2004 amendments, 2008 amendments. And I've listed all of those amendments. Those are amendments to the 1972 Constitution. One need not wonder why we actually needed a new constitution after so many amendments to that 1972 one as well. So in the studio with us now, we have, as I said earlier, Dr. Steve McFeel, my co-host, the Honorable Mayor Lawrence, former Speaker of our Legislative Assembly, and Mr. Gilbert McLean as well. Doc, I'm going to throw the mic over to you in relation to the 1960 amendments. I need to log on here in the meantime.
Well, I think that was Miss Mayor's job. We gave that to her.
Yes, okay, yeah.
Yes, she prepared. Mm-hmm.
Yes, we're going to give her an opportunity to settle in.
Well, but while she's looking at that, I just would like to leave off where we were supposed to leave off in the 1959 and go on to the 1960s.
Okay,
with a quote from what Mr. Duncan Merritt said. On the eve of the coming into force of the 1959 Constitution. And this is what he said. Today is the last day of a Constitution that was given to us in the year 1832. even him agrees with me that the 1832 act law to regulate the Legislative Assembly by those men who took power in 1831 at Pedro St. James was a constitution.
Yes.
And he says, yes, he said, today is the last day of a constitution that was given to us in the year 1832. A constitution that we have worked with for 127 years. Therefore, you will see that our forefathers paved the way for what is now about to take place, our new constitution. Our 1832 constitution actually was never amended technically, but there were certain changes made by resolutions which improved the constitution. So he says between 1832 and 1959 were 127 years at that time that we have been working on that old constitution that was given to us by our forefathers in 1832.
Okay. Miss Mary, you ready for us for 1960?
Yes. The Constitution that was given to us in 1959 had 2 amendments made to it. I've got them here somewhere. Well, I'm losing paper now. But by and large, it stood just as it was. It was not anything that was. There were no major amendments made to that, and they were set out. It was set out so that this 59 Constitution was going to last through all of the back and forth about the Federation and about the independence of Jamaica. That Constitution would stand during all of that time, and we were negotiating with England. We were negotiating with Jamaica. Back and forth, we were sending delegations to those countries. We had gone to Trinidad at one point too, I think, and just trying to get it straight in everybody's mind. What was the Cayman Islands? What was the Cayman Islands status and all of this? Where were we going, and were we going to go it alone, or were we going to be responsible? And I want to go back a little bit to what was said this morning. In retrospect, when you look at what happened to the other Caribbean islands, we chose, shall I say, economic independence over political independence. And the fact of the matter is, you can have political independence, but if you don't have economic independence, somebody owns your soul.
And many times other countries end up with political independence. But
that's what happened. That's what happened throughout the Caribbean. Other countries ended up with their political independence. But, the other thing you have to look at is this: the powers that be at that particular time in our history, they penalized those countries for seeking independence. They cut off their sources of trade: the bananas, the bauxite, the sugar cane. All of the things that the Caribbean had used for trade before suddenly found themselves without markets, which killed the economic growth of the country, and at the same time left them with a political independence that really was worth nothing.
And that political independence usually came as a result of armed conflict as well. So the administering powers, the colonial powers, really were not willing to give up control. And by it being fought for, there were retributions. I mean, when you in my political science courses in university, talked about the Portuguese. And when they left some of their African colonies, they even took the plumbing out of the buildings with them. They left virtually nothing behind.
Nothing behind. And you see, you have to understand, too, that our circumstance was a little bit different from everybody else's. Everybody had something that the administering powers wanted. Whether it was the Dutch, the French, the English, they had something that particular administering power wanted, which was why they colonized those areas, colonized those islands. And when it came to us, we didn't have anything except mosquitoes. Nobody wanted them. We had a very small population, so they couldn't really claim us as slaves or workers. And in the end, that's why they left us to just do our own thing. Nobody cared whether we survived or not. we were out here, and the isolation, although we talk about it now as being the island's time forgot, was what gave us the opportunity to grow up and to meet the challenges that was facing this country. And when you look at the history of how we actually developed, and you realize that the men who went forward to deal with the administering these powers that had so much, these countries that had so much power, when you realize that, sorry.
Yeah.
When you realize that they went out there, that they said they were uneducated. They tried to claim that they were simple-minded. They tell us pretty much the same things now. But they went out there and they met those governments head on. And they said their piece. And they said, this is what we want and this is what we stand for. And while we might say now that we could have gotten more political independence at that time, the fact of the matter is we needed to be in a position to finance that independence. And we weren't then. We didn't even have an airline at that particular point in time when we started all these negotiations. And, all of that would come, all of that would develop. And when I read it, I am so proud when I read Cayman history. And I realize that our people had the foresight to look ahead and see they could build this country on the economic pillars. We didn't have anything we could export. We'd already exported the thatch rope, and that wasn't bringing us any money. But they decided they could export the kindness and the goodness of the Caymanian people. And that's what brought people to these shores. And I'm going to go back to one more thing. Their comment that Mr. Willie quoted Commissioner Cardinal. Commissioner Cardinal was the commissioner who went not just after the infrastructure development of this country, but he went after seeking to bring tourists to the Cayman Islands. He wrote little booklets. He did things that would take the word out there that Cayman was a place that a tourist could come to. He wasn't talking about people who were going to come here and leave. He was talking about us being overwhelmed by people who would come here and impose their ideas and their thoughts on us. And, he started the Catboat Regatta, which was a very popular affair and brought a lot of people here in that particular time. It was very popular. But we weren't overwhelmed by it. Even when we were drafting our own legislation, the Caymanian Protection Law, you look at that document and you wonder what happened to us along the way, that we lost almost every precept in that document that protected our people. And this has nothing to do with 140 nationalities that have come here or that they see are here. Has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that as Caymanians, we are losing our identity. They bring their identity with them, and they hold on to that identity when they come here. The flags will be flying for the Americans today. The flags will be flying for the Canadians. I just came from the airport. I don't see one single British Caymanian flag flying. We are not celebrating who we are. We are content to let other people come and celebrate their heritage in our country.
Doc, anything to add?
I think she sums it up really well, and she makes a great point that leads us into the 1962 year, and that's the financial point that she made. We remember that after the Federation fell apart, when Jamaica when they had the referendum in Jamaica, and the Jamaicans decided to leave the Federation and to go and seek their independence. Well, as we were being administered by them, in 1962, the governor of Jamaica came down and advised us as what had taken place in Jamaica. Blackburn came down and told us what the position would be. There was a meeting. There was a meeting at the Legislative Assembly, and the most important meeting, I think it came on the 17th, but the most important meeting was on 18th and 19th of January 1962, where he came. It's quite interesting to see what the minutes of the meeting the minutes of that Legislative Assembly meeting said.
Okay.
He outlined the position because we were being administered by Jamaica, And then Jamaica was now becoming independent. So now we were left to, where are we going to fit in to this void that Jamaica was leaving behind? We were not part of the Federation. Jamaica was going to be independent, and we were not an independent country at the time. So then he came down, and they had these meetings in the Legislative Assembly, and this is what he put to us.
And that was the town hall at the time.
At the town hall, yes, in town hall.
Now called Constitutional
Hall. This is what he put to us. He says, they said, the advantages to be associated with the United Kingdom, because we had to be associated with somebody. He said there would probably be a gradual move towards self-government, retention by right to be citizens of the United Kingdom and colonies, and the people would continue to carry their present passports as United Kingdom passports with the Cayman Islands label, continue to use the Union Jack and the national anthem. The cost would be less, and the Cayman Islands would continue to have foreign representation by the British consuls all over the world. And those were the advantages. And he said that disadvantages were there would be difficulty in getting aid and assistance from an independent Jamaica, which is something by today, which includes accommodation for sick and patients, etc. The United Kingdom is a very long distance from the islands, and though the United Kingdom values greatly the link with the Cayman Islands, one must be realistic and realize that it will be more difficult to get aid and help from the United Kingdom so far away from the Cayman Islands. And if one looked into the future, it might be possible that the future generations of the Cayman Islands might not be content forever with an association with the United Kingdom. And there would be no experimental period such as the 55 years which had been contemplated when these islands proposed last year to have complete internal self-government with a link with the federal government for defense and external affairs. And this is what he said association with Jamaica would mean. Advantages, he said, these islands would have to have internal self-government at once, as soon as Jamaica gained her independence, if the internal affairs of the island were not to be controlled by Jamaica. Now, you heard what he said. They would have internal self-government at once. And he said, would the Jamaica government be willing to continue to supply the technical advice and experts on the other services? His Excellency drew members' attention to the recent use of the Miss Dorothy Ebanks, who had been treated for a long time at the University College of the West Indies and was now in London after having undergone a series of operations which had been successful. It was understood that this young lady was greatly improved and very happy as a result of these operations. This was all done with the ready cooperation of the government of Jamaica. And there would be a breathing space of 5 years. And in the dim and distant future, would the future generations, children and grandchildren, wish to link with the Caribbean rather than with Europe, this might be considered a good reason for association with Jamaica. And then he went on to the disadvantages. He said, the cost, he said, in association with an independent Jamaica would naturally cost a lot, as Jamaica itself would have to provide representation in other parts of the world, and it would be natural to expect that where the Cayman Islands linked with Jamaica, they would bear a proportionate part of the cost of these services and of the defense forces. The Cayman Islands might be expected, if not initially, to accept Jamaican nationality and its flag, though this matter was not yet settled, and the governor said that he would not, at this stage, give a formal answer. He said that this problem, as regards the Turks and Caicos Islands, was now being tackled. He hoped that if an association with Jamaica was decided, it would be possible during this experimental period for those islands to retain their present status, though at the end of the 5 years trial an irrevocable decision would have to be made. And then he went on to say, in the dim and distant future, through an association with Jamaica, these islands might lose their separate identity.
Okay, we have to take a commercial break. We've gone a little bit past it. Folks, please stay tuned. The roundtable discussion on our Constitution will continue after this short commercial break.
The following is a special announcement from the Cayman Islands Civil Service Association.
It's that time again. SIXA Back to School Member Backpack and School Supplies Distribution will take place July 8th to the 12th, daily from 1 to 7 p.m. in Grand Cayman at the SIXA office located on the second floor of the Hospital Road Plaza above number 1 Shoe Shop.
And July 13th in Cayman Brac from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. at the Aston Ruddy Civic Center Medical Wing.
Members, you are being asked to kindly bring identification, and if you are collecting bags on behalf of another member, please bring a written signed note from that member with a copy of their ID as well. Remember, SIXA Members Backpack Distribution, July 8th to the 12th, daily from 1 to 7 p.m. in Grand Cayman at the SIXA office located on the second floor of the Hospital Road Plaza above number 1 Shoe Shop.
July 13th in Cayman Brac, 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. at the Aston Ruddy Civic Center Medical Wing. And to quote Anthony D'Angelo, develop a passion for learning. If you do, you will never cease to grow.
CUC advises participants in the Green Iguana Culling Program to exercise extreme caution around the CUC's poles and power lines, especially when extracting iguanas from trees or branches that are in close proximity to poles and power lines. Participants should keep all objects such as poles, sticks, or hooks away from any CUC equipment to avoid any electrical contact. For further information, please contact our customer service team at 949-5200 or via email at service@cuc.ky.
Hi, this is Bob Kingsley, and this weekend,
the Bob Kingsley Top 40 Countdown is brought to you by Merengue Town. Liven up your weekends and let loose with the grooves of Merengue Town. It's time. Feel the rhythm. Time to feel the vibes. It's time for Merengue Town.
and of course the rest of the 40 hottest hit makers on the radio this weekend, right here on the Country Top 40.
Headlines. With the latest headlines. All the news when you want it. Tune in to Radio Cayman for hourly headlines of the day's top stories.
One of Cayman's bright and shining young stars.
Local, regional, international.
Headlines.
Turning to international news. Updates on the hour between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. on weekdays. Radio Cayman News.
Headlines.
Your voice, your choice for today's biggest news.
Oh, Cayman moon.
The voice of the Cayman Islands, Radio Cayman.
Shining down from above.
We love our listeners.
Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Good afternoon and welcome back to the Constitutional Radio Roundtable discussion being held with Dr. Steve McFeel, Honorable Mayor Lawrence, former Speaker of our Legislative Assembly, former member of the Legislative Assembly and former Minister, Mr. Gilbert McLean. This is a continuation of our discussion this morning, all being put on by this afternoon, sorry, not evening yet, all being put on by Celebrate Cayman. Again, we want to be we're extremely thankful and grateful to the chairperson of Celebrate Cayman, Mr. Alfonso Wright as well. As I said earlier, we will be joined later on by the Honorable D. Kurt Tibbetts, also by the chairperson of the Constitutional Commission, Mr. Von Carter. I also want to remind our listeners and our viewers that we have closed off the phone lines, but you certainly can email us. Email me at fortherecord@candw.ky, or you can send us a message, either question or if you want to make a statement on WhatsApp 925-3261 as well. This morning we also spoke about the women's right to vote. We spoke about the petition that had been signed. I think we're not hearing as much as we want to hear from Mr. Gilbert McLean, but what I'd like him to share with our listening and viewing audience, the names of some of those women who signed that petition. And we did get, while I have the mic, we did get a question from a listener as well, and this was conveyed to us. We want to thank Sterling Duane Banks for conveying this to us as well. Someone pointed out that although the petition had been signed in 1948, it took 10 years, 11 years before women got the right to vote, and wanted an explanation as to why that occurred. I believe that we covered it this morning, but just for the sake of completeness, we will again speak to why there was a 10-year gap in between before women got the right to vote. But Mr. McLean, you first in terms of some of the names there.
Yes, Mr. Fonzo gave me a copy of some documents here, and it is actually the petition from each individual district. In Bodden Town, it's just about everybody here. I was a younger fella then, but I know just about all of these people. There's Francine Jackson, Mr. Vernon Jackson's wife, of course, Miss Gwyneth Hunter, Mr. Clifton Hunter's wife, Miss Evelyn Wood, that Madam Speaker spoke about earlier, Doris Lever, Enid Smith, Hildred Ebanks, who was a teacher in Bodden Town, Doris Bodden, well-known lady there, Lorna Bodden, Olive Moore, Asenta Macfield. All of these are well-known persons. Jessie Rich, Nurse Jessie, that the clinic was named after, the Jessie Rich clinic in Bodden Town. Nettie Levy, Ariel Christian, Theolyn McCoy, my teacher when I was in primary school, Mr. Har McCoy's wife. And I see, and one thing I noticed about it, it seems like there must have been a tendency or a requirement of what they considered more appropriate to use the name of the husband.
Male-dominated world at the time.
Yeah, I see Mrs. Willie Wood. And I asked you earlier, in fact, about something here in what I saw in Georgetown, that there is signature here, Mrs. Orrett Connor.
Yes.
Obviously your mother,
Myrtle
yes?
Myrtle Connor. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And in Georgetown, of course, the numbers are greater there. I see Olga Seymour, Selverine Banks.
We used to call her Arsene, Skipper's grandmother.
Mrs. Hector Hudson.
Mm-hmm.
Miss
Kathleen.
Antoinette E. Banks. I see Mrs. Charles Clifford. That is Charles Clifford's mother.
Yes.
You know, there's so many names that I hear, but you know, the thing that really strikes me is obviously the importance to these women of wanting the right to vote. Mm-hmm. And obviously, even though in the face of their husbands and everything else and the powers that be, it wasn't like people here who were so shy of signing a petition saying we want to have some say in the port development. These people obviously...
But you don't want to be identified.
No. You know, it's so many. That was Georgetown, and of course it's Bodden Town. East End, and Mr. Wright was telling me that something peculiar about it was that the people in Gun Bay was like separate in there.
They still think that way today. Gun Bay is separate from East End.
That's right, Gun Bay.
They're doing what they say.
Gun Bay was shown as separate from East End as such. Dora Connolly, Elida Bodden, Mary, Martha Watler, Rachel Rankin, May Watler, Elma Wood, Nina Connolly. And then in East End there were Felicia Pucci, Evangeline McLaughlin, who was a long time
She's still alive.
Yes,
teacher in Northside. Isley Connolly Rich, we certainly know her.
Yes.
Claire Rankin, Aileen McField, Naomi Jefferson, Joyce McLaughlin, Beryl McLaughlin, Vernicia McLaughlin. These are names that we were very familiar with, And
that was East End?
That was East End.
And Miss Eileen's name is on there. I wonder because remember now, Teacher McField was teaching in East End after he got married. I saw an article where, and this is off the, the subject altogether. Teacher McField, when he had his wedding, 1,600 people at the wedding, 800 and something people at the reception. What a wedding that must have been.
Imagine at that time.
With that, we have to take a commercial break. When we return, Madam Speaker, we would like you to explain to our listening and viewing audience again the implications of the signing of that petition, the other signatures that were that were gained after that, two petitions.
There were two petitions.
And they were gained after that, and when women actually got the right to vote, the gap in between. Folks, please stay tuned. The special edition of Talk Today, the special roundtable discussion on our Constitution, celebrating 60 years of Constitution in the Cayman Islands, will continue after this break.
The management of Health Service Station Limited would like to take this opportunity to notify their customers that they will be closing from Monday, July 1st through Tuesday, July 9th for maintenance and upgrade to their fuel dispensers. They will be reopening for business on Wednesday, July 10th at 6 a.m. with regular scheduled hours, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. They apologize for this inconvenience and appreciate your understanding in this matter.
Congratulations, it's a boy.
During the greatest events of your life, whether or not you have the right health insurance coverage should be the last thing on your mind. That's why at Fidelity Health, we are committed to helping you get matched with the right plan to suit you and your family. We offer a range of plans to suit your budget, plus access to a network of quality care throughout the Caribbean and the USA. You can relax and enjoy life's greatest moments when you are covered with Fidelity Health. Call us today at 949-7822 for a free quote.
King Sports Center Art of Fun Summer Camp is back from July 2nd to August 2nd. Now in its 15th year, the Art of Fun Camp is ideal for kids ages 5 through 10 with activities from football, basketball, dodgeball, squash, rock climbing, arts and craft, dance, singing, and more. Your child can practice physical and social skills while having fun in a safe and secure environment. For more info, call 946-KING. Like King's Sports Center on Facebook, and you can also find them on Instagram or call 946-5464. King Sports Center, providing you with all your fitness, recreation, and relaxation needs. Register before May 31st and save 10% on camp registration.
You like having options. So, Western Union is giving you another way to send a money transfer around the world with Western Union's direct-to-bank money transfer option. Visit a Western Union agent location and you could start sending money directly to qualifying bank accounts in over 60 countries. Best of all, it's for one flat transfer fee to send any amount direct to a bank account. Visit a Western Union agent location to learn more and start sending money transfers direct to bank accounts today. Western Union.
Western Union also makes money from currency exchange. When choosing a money transmitter, compare fees and exchange rates, which may vary based on a number of factors and are subject to change.
The following is a special announcement from the Cayman Islands Civil Service Association.
It's that time again. SIXA Back to School. Member Backpack and School Supplies Distribution will take place July 8th to the 12th, daily from 1 to 7 p.m. in Grand Cayman at the SIXA office located on the second floor of the Hospital Road Plaza above number 1 Shoe Shop.
And July 13th in Cayman Brac from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. at the Aston Ready Civic Center Medical Wing.
Members, you are being asked to kindly bring bring identification. And if you are collecting bags on behalf of another member, please bring a written signed note from that member with a copy of their ID as well. Remember, SIGSA members backpack distribution July 8th to the 12th, daily from 1 to 7 p.m. in Grand Cayman at the SIGSA office located on the second floor of the Hospital Road Plaza above number 1 shoe shop.
July 13th in Cayman Brac, 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. at the Aston Ready Civic Center Medical Wing. And to quote Anthony D'Angelo, develop a passion for learning. If you do, you will never cease to grow.
Shaken yet standing firm.
I was not built to break.
This is Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Afternoon and welcome back to this special edition of Celebrate Cayman. It's a scheduled constitutional radio round table where we're discussing the various constitutions of the Cayman Islands. Before we go back to Madam Speaker, we don't want to leave out any of the districts in terms of giving some samples of the names of the women who signed these petitions as well. And we're going to also ask Mr. McLean to just read the preamble of the prayer that is on the petition itself as well.
Yes, OC, the one that we haven't spoke about yet is the one from West Bay, and it's a petition to the Legislative Assembly of Justices in Vestry, and is addressed to Mr. President and honourable members of the Legislative Assembly. And it reads, "We, the undersigned, the women of West Bay, Grand Cayman, do beg your favourable consideration of this our petition. It appears to us that constitutional changes of the greatest moment are imminent throughout the British West Indies, and that such changes may be reflected in changes in the Cayman Islands. We, your humble petitioners, do hereby pray that women should be permitted from henceforth to exercise the right of voting in elections, that they should be permitted to hold public office, and that in any new law or consolidation or codification of the law of the Constitution of the Cayman Islands, the rights of women to vote and to hold public office should be safeguarded, so that we be not regarded by you or the world as less worthy than the women of other lands who have been accorded those rights." Quite a feisty statement. They make their position clear, and this was on the 21st of March 1957, which I understand this was the first petition, and then there was a second, which This
would have been the second one. This was the second one. Yeah, the first one was.
And some of these names here is Ethel Farrington, Marion Parsons, Madge Ebanks, Bessie Ebanks, Ethel Ebanks, Nesta, I can't make that one out, Aldith Ebanks, Eliza Banks, Mary A. Jackson, Gloria Parsons, Julia Panton, Alicia Farrington, Miriam Rivers, Edna Smith, Leola Bodden, Gertel Bush, Ina Ebanks, Dell Ebanks, Isley Smith, Elena Washburn, Jessie Banks, Lucy Wells, just to give some samples of those persons who signed. There are quite a number of them.
Yes. Madam Speaker, the gap between
Yes.
explanation.
When the women took the men on in 1948, it was a mere handful of women in Georgia, and they were all from Georgia, and there weren't any other women from any other districts at that particular time. And they lit a spark. And once all the constitution changes began to be discussed in the 50s, they decided this was a good time to move forward with their drive to get the vote for women. And you will notice what the petition says. This is being done everywhere else, and they understand these changes are coming, but they want to be included in those changes. And so they asked first for legislation, which was granted in November of 1958. But they also asked that legislation be embodied in the new constitution that would be coming. And that's where the second petition came in. That second petition carried women from and it was sent just how you see it's done. Each district had their own copy, although it's the same petition. And it was taken care of by the women in that particular district and presented to the Parliament or to the Legislative Assembly of Justices and Vestry. This is the voice of the women in this country. We want to be included in the new Constitution and in the legislation, and new legislation drafted to include us. And so it takes time for these things to happen. You know, remember, we were recovering from the war years, and here at that time in 1948, we were still having to deal with all of that. And, you know, we had a couple little hurricanes in there, too, that did us some damage. So it was all a matter of talk and then action. So although it looks like a long time to us, you have to understand that political changes in any little place like as small as ours takes time to accomplish. And in that particular instance, the women, it was the persistence of the women. They wanted this, and when they went after it district by district so that the message was clear. This is not a handful of women in Georgetown wanting this. We want it, island-wide.
Right. And so what we ended up at the end of the day in our 1959 Constitution in Section 32,
yes.
Which basically reads that subject to the provisions of the next following section, a person shall be entitled to be registered as an elector in one electoral district only, but he shall not be entitled to be registered in an elector unless he is a British subject of age 21 years or upwards, and either has resided in the islands for a period of at least 12 months immediately before the date of registration, or is domiciled in the islands and is resident therein at that date. And that basically was all of the qualifications at that point in time, 1959. Of course, like you pointed out, it included women, the right of women to vote as well. Now, we're losing a little bit of time, and so we're going to try to do a little bit of catching up as well. We need to look at the 1960 amendment to the Constitution. Madam Speaker, are you ready for that?
I think she did that already.
You did in 1960?
And we were back in the 1962.
Okay, 1962. Sorry, yes, 1962, yes. Okay,
well,
go right ahead, Madam Speaker.
The purpose of this order was to substitute the revised Constitution for that provided to the Cayman Islands in 1959, the order in council in 1959. Once we made the decision to stay out of the Federation, they had to give us some document that would take us forward beyond that. And so the 1962 Constitution does that. It synchronizes its commencement with that of the independence of Jamaica, whose governor was under the original order as the governor of the Cayman Islands. And though the power of the governor was transferred from the governor of Jamaica to the administrator of Cayman, the title was not transferred until 1972, when Mr. Long received it. But we have been, over the years, we have been prone to write things into the Constitution, and then they don't come into effect the day the Constitution comes into effect. They are held back and come into effect another time. Like the Speaker took 20 years. Although the Speaker was listed in the 1972 Constitution, it took 20 years before we decided that we would go forward to have a Speaker.
Yes.
And then it was an appointed Speaker. And at that point in time, when after a couple of years of that, the House decided, no, we want an elected Speaker. And so that's when they changed over there. But we build all of these things in. We built in the, I'm going quickly through stuff that we have.
Sure.
But we built in the Boundaries Commission. We built in the one-man vote. Whatever document we have has things built into it that we are going to do when we think it's the appropriate time to do it. And so the Constitution that was done in 1900 was written. But we also had a problem with that Constitution. For some reason or other, they forgot to lay it on the table of Parliament.
Yes.
And so it was an illegal.
That's what they said.
Well, it was an illegal.
That's what they said.
We were operating the country legally, basically, for 3 years until somebody saw it, noticed it, and then they passed the 65 Constitution, which took into account the fact that we had done all of this stuff from 62 to 65, ratified it, and included it in a new document with just a couple of changes, actually.
Okay, that is very important. We have to go to the news at 1 o'clock. When we return, we're going to come back to you, Madam Speaker, in that regard, to tie that in with the 1965 as well. We have a new guest in the studio. We will introduce him as well. We're going to get on to his topic a little bit later on, but he can certainly participate in this conversation as well, because I'm sure these are documents that he worked with during his tenure. Also, please stay tuned. The special edition of Talk Today on our Constitution will continue after the 1 o'clock news.
Radio K-Man.
Radio K-Man's newsroom. These are the biggest stories right now.
With your latest headlines, I'm April Cummings. Liquor license holders are being urged to apply for their renewals before the board meets in September. There have been some changes designed to simplify and streamline the application process. Officials say only applications received by the deadline will be considered at the Liquor Licensing Board's annual meeting, which is on September 9th. Application forms can be downloaded from the Department of Commerce and Investment's website at dci.gov.ky. The deadline to submit your application is August 16th. In international headlines, a boat carrying 86 migrants from Libya sank in the Mediterranean Sea. Only 3 passengers are known to have survived the shipwreck. The International Organization for Migration said the boat sank late Wednesday. 82 of the migrants who had been on board were missing. Fishermen did pull 4 men from the sinking boat. 1 died overnight. Oklahoma Attorney General Mike Hunter has secured about $355 million from 2 groups of defendant drug makers in the state's lawsuit against opioid manufacturers, and he's trying to make the case that even more money should come Oklahoma's way in the first such state case to go to trial. While Hunter presses the claim that Johnson & Johnson is to blame for Oklahoma's opioid epidemic, he also faces criticism, some from his own Republican colleagues, about his team's deal-making and go-it-alone style. Because Oklahoma is the first case to proceed to trial, the litigation and state's earlier settlements with OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma and Israeli-owned Teva Pharmaceuticals are being closely watched, especially with roughly 1,500 similar lawsuits filed by state, local, and tribal governments consolidated before a federal judge in Ohio. It is Independence Day in the U.S., the 4th of July, and the nation is celebrating with fireworks, parades, and concerts. Among the largest, the Macy's Fireworks Show over the East River in New York City, which includes a concert broadcast on NBC with country stars like Luke Bryan and Brad Paisley and contemporary performers like Jennifer Hudson, Ciara, and Khaled. Those are your headlines from Radio K-Man's newsroom. I'm April Cummings.
Radio K-Man, the voice of the Cayman Islands.
What's happening in your community? News and information, music and more. You can find us. www.radiokman.gov.ky. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Radio K-Man is your choice, your voice for today's biggest news. Radio K-Man.
A caring and community spirit, cherished family and cultural values. These are some of the things that still embodies the Caymanian way of life in the Eastern Districts today. Savannah Pharmacy, your neighborhood pharmacy, located in Countryside Shopping Village, is delighted to offer products and services of real value. Whether it's catering to your family's medical needs or carrying apparel, gifts, and beauty products, Savannah Pharmacy provides you with more than just prescriptions. Remember, they're always just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours, including Sundays and holidays. Savannah Pharmacy. For more information, call 946-3336.
The following is a special announcement from the Cayman Islands Civil Service Association.
It's that time again. SIXA Back to School. Member Backpack and School Supplies Distribution will take place July 8th to the 12th, daily from 1 to 7 p.m. in Grand Cayman at the SIXA office located on the 2nd floor of the Hospital Road Plaza above number 1 Shoe Shop.
And July 13th in Cayman Brac from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. at the Aston Ruddy Civic Center Medical Wing.
Members, you are being asked to kindly bring identification. And if you are collecting bags on behalf of another member, please bring a written signed note from that member with a copy of their ID as well. Remember, SIGSA members backpack distribution July 8th to the 12th, daily from 1 to 7 p.m. in Grand Cayman at the SIGSA office located on the second floor of the Hospital Road Plaza above number 1 shoe shop.
July 13th in Cayman Brac, 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. at the Aston Reddy Civic Center Medical Wing. And to quote Anthony D'Angelo, develop a passion for learning. If you do, you will never cease to grow.
The Cayman Islands Seafarers Association wishes to inform all members that there will be a general meeting on Tuesday, 16th July at 7:30 p.m. in the Seafarers Hall, 11 Victory Avenue, Prospect. There will be 3 buses from West Bay Town Hall, which leaves at 6 p.m. The Barnes bus route in Georgetown leaves the public library parking area at 6:45 p.m., stopping at the Cayman Compass Building and the Airport Fosters. The bus marked Bobo is $1 public transport and is blue in color. Pickups are from British Caymanian, Uncle Bill's, Walkers Road, Shedden Road and Crew Road. The bus from East End. Pickups are at the school parking lot, the gas station and the Wreck of the 10 Sails starting at 5:45. North side pickups are at Chisholm Store and the soccer field starting at 6:15. The Boddentown pickups is at Lorna's gas station at 6:45 and the Savannah pickups is at the gas station at 7 p.m.
Sometimes having a middleman is not a bad thing, especially when it comes to insurance. Do you know that when it comes to cost, ease, speed, and peace of mind, insurance brokers ranked higher than when customers buy direct? So, for all your insurance needs, call Fidelity Insurance. We're the middleman you want. Call us today at 949-7822. Fidelity. We're good for you.
From district to district, moving through the waters to Cayman Brac and Little Cayman. Your station, your voice. All things Cayman. One radio, many people. This is home.
Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
And welcome back to this special edition of Talk Today. We're celebrating the Cayman Islands Constitution. Celebrate Cayman, 60 years, the 4th of July, 2019. This is a scheduled constitutional round table taking place. We have been joined in the studio by Mr. Jason Webster, who's the Director of the Policy Coordination Unit in the Cabinet Office. Also with us, no stranger to the people of the Cayman Islands, the Honorable D. Kurt Tibbetts, former leader of government business, now retired and in great shape. He's with us in the studio as well. He's here primarily to talk about the 2009 Constitution, and what we're going to talk about that more is really the whole process in terms of what we went through to achieve our Constitution. And, of course, he has also had to work with our previous Constitution, the 1972 Constitution, with all of its amendments. That Constitution lasted, I believe, if my maths are right, some 37 years before we ended up with a new Constitution. So, Mr. Tibbetts and Mr. Jason, please say hello to our listening and viewing audience.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Connor, for that welcome. The area that we're discussing right now is not my area of expertise, but I am excited to be here with all these great constitutional minds to listen and learn about the former amendments before the 1972 and 2009 Constitution. So thank you for welcoming me.
And you are so proud to tell us that you are that much younger. Thank you. Good afternoon to our listening audience, and certainly I was here for a little while before now listening to the experts, and you could not, or whoever arranged it could not have chosen a better panel to be able to inform the public as well as they're doing now. And you are right, Orrett. We want to spend a little time talking about the process of the 2009 Constitution and how we got there. Mm-hmm. But please don't leave it to me, because don't forget, you were there every inch of the way.
Yes.
So what you don't remember, I will try, and what I don't, so will you.
Excellent.
Between us, we'll get there.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so now what we want to continue talking about the constitutions that were proposed, some that went into effect, some that didn't go into effect. I like to say the ones that we got and the ones that got away. And we're going to, again, ask Madam Speaker to lead us down that path as well. But I believe before we go to Dr. Macfield, you had some comments in relation to the 1962 Constitution and why it was not brought into effect.
Well, it was obvious. It was a political infighting. After Jamaica left the Federation, and we were told that we would get internal self-government immediately if we wanted it. There was a draft constitution that entailed having a lieutenant governor, a ministerial system with a chief minister, and that as the governor said, and just to be accurate, this is what the governor said. The governor said, if we chose that route, it was recognized that a small unit such as the Cayman Islands could not get along unless associated with a larger territory. He said a small territory such as this could not, in spite of its progressiveness, handle defense, external affairs, and representation in the United Nations without economic and financial aid. And that was one of the things that McTaggart, Dr. Ron McTaggart, didn't want to have, as Ms. Mayer was saying this, Dr. Mayer was saying this morning. And on top of that, there was a lot of infighting in who was going to be the first chief minister of the Cayman Islands if we went that route. And in fact, Mr. Orman had drafted a constitution with full internal self-government if we had gone that route. That was rejected by the people. And then after that was rejected by the people, then we had the 1962 ordinary constitution, in which we would not have a full ministerial system, the chief minister, we would have an administrator and so forth. And that was supposed to come into force on the same day of Jamaica's constitution coming in August on the 6th. That never happened. And so we were stuck then with the 1965 constitution, as Dr. Lawrence has said. That goes to show, and one of the reasons why, as I've said, and some people said even Mr. Orman Panner's uncle was against him.
Mr. Ernest.
Mr. Ernest was against him becoming the first chief minister.
He points that out in his book, favorite son.
Becoming chief minister, and that was the reasons why that constitution never came into force. The official version about it not being laid before Parliament is the official version, but we all know the real version was.
Okay.
Well, it wasn't that it didn't come into force. We used it for 3 years. It wasn't legal, you know. And that's why they came up with the 65 order to legalize what had transpired before. It was similar to what happened to us in the beginning with when we went there and asked them who we're from, and they came up with this proposal that and wrote this new legislation that all the laws that had been passed by the previous governments in Cayman would be recognized. They ratified all of that, and all the decisions that had been made in the courts and everything was all legalized by that order that they made in Jamaica when they took us in. And this basically the same thing has happened here, in that we used an order for 3 years that had not been laid on the table of Parliament, and so when they found it out, they had to come up with something to correct that and to ratify and legalize all the decisions that we had made under that Constitution. Because don't forget now, the decisions made under the Constitution isn't just what's in the book. It's all the laws and legislation and the courts and everything else hangs in the balance.
Yes.
So it all had to be legalized, and that's where the 62 order came in.
Okay, can we jump now to
the 65 order came in.
Can we jump now to 72 and the various amendments? Let's see if we can cover that in 15 minutes.
There was 2 amendments to that order, the 65 order.
Okay.
Then I think they were substantial. Section 9 was amended to state that the administrator shall not be obliged to consult with the Executive Council in the exercise of any power vested in him. And Section 53 was also amended, giving him absolute authority over the civil service. And those two things, I mean, Section 54 in so far as it relates to the making of appointments and Section 54 in determination of duties that will be performed by particular officers, including their assignment to particular posts or the granting, withholding, or reduction of salaries, gratuities, benefits payable to public officers. He was now given in that amending order all of that power that he had not had before.
Why was that? Do we know?
Because they had this. We're back to the infighting. We were back to the infighting, and the administrator had gathered around him an advisory council. That of Caymanians,
advisory executive council,
who were literally kowtowing to what he's saying, because he's appointing them and he's nominating them. So he has his own people in there. That was what he used to curtail the party system that was actually being put in place at that time. The people who voted, and I said before, that's what brought that motion of no confidence by Orrett Connor and a bunch of them against all of these people who had decided that they would go along with the administrator in making the civil service, putting the civil service under him, without reference to the House. This was done in their little private meeting and taken to London and enshrined in an amendment order. And they brought a motion of no confidence against them, but he couldn't stop it. They missed it by one vote.
Okay, 1972.
And there was another one, the amending order in 71, which declared there should be a governor of the Cayman Islands who should be appointed by Her Majesty by commission under her sign, manual, and signet.
When the change was made from administrator?
Yes, but that didn't come in. It came into effect in 1971, but the title was not given until 1972 when it was given to Mr. Long.
Okay. 1972 Constitution?
Now, the 1972 Constitution, that was, again, everything that was born in that age went through hard labor. Went through hard labor to get there.
No C-section.
No C-section. There were no shortcuts to that one at all. In fact, they dragged it so long that they actually granted an extra year to the House to complete the work on that Constitution. It started under Mr. Hunter, and Mr. Hunter died in January in 72, and then it concluded on Mr. Orrett Connor. But the infighting in the Parliament concerning what should go in that Constitution was so strong that the House was given an extra year because they were told you have to get it done. And they served a 3-year term, and then they were given an extra year to finish the 72 Constitution. And in fact, when the 72 Constitution came into effect, they introduced the 4-year term, and they also lowered the voting age to 18 so that young people who could go to sea at 16 could have a chance to vote because, they were men. Literally, they were considered men.
And they were paying their head taxes, too?
Well, they had to pay their little taxes.
Before you ship out, you had to do that?
But and that's when we got the Executive Council, where the governor, the council was elected from the floor of the House. It was elected from the floor of the House, but the governor assigned the portfolios to them. And that was done, and he would swear them in his office and assign the portfolios to them. And although he still kept his hand on the reins of those portfolios, by and large, they had a little bit more flexibility in getting things done. That's when they managed to get that 72 to 76 infrastructural work done. The Legislative Assembly, the courts, the roads, the dock, the airport was started. All of this was done in that period because the men had a little bit more flexibility in making decisions and getting things done.
But one of the things, the
debates
that led up to that Constitution was the feelings of the Caymanians. They did not want the Attorney General to be an EXCO member to sit in the legislature. That was one of the big things. They said they did not want an Attorney General to sit in the legislature, that he should be a government officer. He should be a civil servant appointed to advise, but he should not be sitting in the legislature. No, neither in the cabinet, neither in the executive council.
Does that sound familiar, Mr. Tibbetts?
Neither in the executive council. They did not want him there.
Residents of 2009.
They did not want him there, but they did. It would not carry. The British government would not allow them to have that. To have that in it.
Okay.
that way.
The various amendments now, Madam Speaker?
Yes.
Not quite that way. Semi.
Okay.
The amendments in 1984,
yes,
that order redefined the qualifications for election to the legislature and for registration as an elector.
Yes.
And it established a Court of Appeal.
Yes.
Up until that point, the Court of Appeal of Jamaica sat as the Court of Appeal of Cayman. They would come down like every other month and sit here, or every quarter, whatever, whenever they were needed, they would come down. But it's 72 Constitution. There's 84 amendment to the Constitution, established our own Court of Appeal in the Cayman Islands. And it's... Those were the two major things that were done in that order. And then in the 87 amending order, that made further provisions for electors and candidates for election to have a closer ties with the Cayman Islands. You had to, if you were going to participate then, the time was extended for when you how much time was required for you to be in the house, how much time was required for you to be resident here before you could vote. And then the 92 amending order provided for the increase of the members, the number of the members in the House, from 12 to 15. And it increased the quorum as well from 7 to 8. And the 1993 amending order increased the number of persons to be elected to the Executive Council by the House from 4 to 5. Before we would name 4, and he would appoint 3. Well, they switched it now. We're now able to, in this amending order, gave us the power to name 5. And it changed their title from members to ministers. Remember, Benson and all them were called members of the House. And every way they went, people say, what's a member of the House? Aren't you a member of the House? And we wrote with a capital M, but nobody saw the capital M, right? So they changed it from members to ministers at that time. And it also wrote new provisions were also included for the Attorney General and the Auditor General to protect their tenure of office and the independence of the Attorney General in respect of the conduct of prosecutions. Then more specific provision was made for the office of Speaker and Deputy Speaker and for disqualifying members in the event of conviction of offences punishable by at least 1 year of imprisonment. It also provided for a complaints commissioner, which wasn't brought into effect right then again, a register of interest, which was brought into effect, and for referenda, which we didn't use, and established both the Grand Court and the Court of Appeal by constitution as opposed to being by law. Up until that point in the 1993 amending order, the Grand Court was established by law and the Court of Appeal was established by law. And in this amending order, it wrote them into the Constitution. It made them a constitutional body.
Yes.
Okay.
In 2003, the order made provisions for the establishment of a Boundaries Commission. That was to make recommendations on the establishment of 17 single-member constituencies for election to the Legislative Assembly. It formally established the office of the Leader of Government Business and the Leader of the Opposition and renamed the Executive Council as the Cabinet. That's Mr. Kurt's time.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And 2004, the amending order declared that British Overseas Territories citizen, who is also a British citizen, was not disqualified from election to this Legislative Assembly. When Britain very generously
gave us British citizenship, and people went forward and claimed it, well, the Constitution was written so you had to be a Caymanian. And you couldn't have all this extra. You could be a British Overseas Territory citizen and a Caymanian, but you couldn't be a British Overseas Territory and a British citizen. So they had to amend the Constitution in the 2004 order to allow the members, the sitting members of the House who had went and got British passport
to be legal,
to legalize.
And it also would have opened the way for other all British subjects to be able to sit.
Yes, we fixed that quickly.
Yeah, that was amended too. And then the explanation given for this second amendment, Mr. Backfield, was that the earlier amendment in 2004 had inadvertently omitted the phrase British Overseas Territories Act 2002. We had missed out something again. And it modified the Constitution to require the governor to dissolve the current assembly no later than March 31st, 2005. And that came about because of the Ivan hurricane, when he had to extend the life of the House into the following year, to take care of the devastation and get ready for the next election, because that election was supposed to take place in September. In November, sorry. The campaign, the campaign started. I was scheduled to start my campaign that night. We had to extend the life of the House to take care of that. The 2005 amending order, and this is an important one too, because one of the things we had was, like, if you became 18 and it wasn't before the registration process had begun, you couldn't sit in the House. You couldn't vote.
You couldn't vote.
Sorry.
So several people were disenfranchised as a result.
Yes. So the 2005 amending order made it possible for anyone who had attained the age of 18 years on or before the polling day. In other words, you could be registered if your birthday, like polling day was the 25th of May, and your birthday came any time before that, between the registration period and that, you could be registered to vote. So those were the major amendments that were done in that. To that 72 Constitution.
Very quickly, the ones that got away.
I to go through them quickly.
Yeah,
so
you did a good job.
Thanks very much.
The ones that got away in 1992?
The ones that got away.
Yes.
You deal with the one that got away.
Wallace and Smith.
Yes.
The Wallace and Smith Constitution. Wallace and Smith, Sleeper Smith and Wallace came down, and they had all the meetings around the countryside, and they went back to England and had a draft constitution, but give us a full ministerial system. And of course, that was also not agreed to by Mr. Truman Borden, who took out the
freedom of
the Bill of Rights from it.
Yes.
And freedom of conscience from it. The Bill of Rights was not included, and that constitution went north.
Okay. Can you tell them who Sir Frederick Smith was? Eminent Caribbean jurist?
Yeah, he was the eminent Caribbean jurist from
Barbados.
Barbados.
Yes.
And we used to call him Sleeper Smith because he used to look sleepy all the time. And at that same time, the Caymanian Bar Association also had a draft constitution that they presented to them. Yeah. That went by the wayside. And then there was another constitution that was proposed, 2003 constitution that was proposed by Messrs. Benson, Ebanks, Leonard Ebanks, and Arthur Hunter.
They were constitutional commissioners that were appointed,
and they had a draft constitution, a 2003 constitution that didn't see the light of day either. And so we were, from 1972, we had amendments to that constitution to rectify things, and then it was only in 2009, under the Kirk Tibbetts government, where we got a new modern constitution, and he will attest to that. He will.
Well, we're going to take a commercial break, and when we return, we're going to hear from the Honourable D. Kirk Tibbetts as to, we can understand with so many amendments to that 1972 Constitution, we needed to consolidate something there as well. Plus, we were really moving ahead. We had come a long way, but we wanted to move further, and we will hear from the Honourable D. Kirk Tibbetts when we return from this commercial break. Please stay tuned. The special edition of Talk Today will continue shortly.
There are plenty of reasons to be a Logic customer. There's lightning-fast internet connectivity. There's the great overall customer experience. And now, you can improve your Wi-Fi connectivity with Logic Boost Wi-Fi for free. With Boost, you can extend your freedom to stream, game, and download seamlessly anywhere in your home, like your patio or your underground lair if you have one. Sign up now for any Logic Bundle package and get free Boost Wi-Fi for a limited time. Visit logic.ky for details.
Always separate debris from household garbage after a hurricane hits. Debris includes roofing materials, downed tree branches, and metals. All items of debris must be placed in separate piles to the front of the property or at a side that is easily accessible to collection trucks. Debris must be placed in a location that will not cause obstruction to roadways or come in contact with electrical lines. For more post-hurricane waste management tips, visit the DEH website at www.deh.gov.ky.
The following is a special announcement from the Cayman Islands Civil Service Association.
It's that time again. SIXA Back to School. Member Backpack and School Supplies Distribution will take place July 8th to the 12th, daily from 1 to 7 p.m. in Grand Cayman at the SIXA office located on the second floor of the Hospital Road Plaza above number 1 shoe shop.
And July 13th in Cayman Brac from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. at the Aston Ready Civic Center Medical Wing.
Members, you are being asked to kindly bring identification, and if you are collecting bags on behalf of another member, please bring a written signed note from that member with a copy of their ID as well. Remember, SIXA members backpack distribution July 8th to the 12th, daily from 1 to 7 p.m. in Grand Cayman at the SIXA office located on the second floor of the Hospital Road Plaza above number 1 shoe shop.
July 13th in Cayman Brac, 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. at the Aston Ready Civic Center Medical Wing. And to quote Anthony D'Angelo, develop a passion for learning. If you do, you will never cease to grow.
Traffic congestion is bad for your mental health, bad for your wallet, and bad for the environment. Alternative commuting habits are the solution. Cycling, walking, busing, or carpooling will help save you money, benefit your health, conserve energy, and help the environment. Do your part. Visit the ministry Facebook page for details of plans for bicycle lanes, the latest bus schedules, and be an energy advocate.
From district to district, moving through the waters to Cayman Brac and Little Cayman. Your station, your voice. All things Cayman. One radio, many people. This is home.
Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Good afternoon and welcome back to the special edition of Talk Today. It is a constitutional radio roundtable discussing the various constitutions of the Cayman Islands. In the studio with me, Dr. Steve McFeel. We also have with us the policy director of the Policy Coordination Unit in the Cabinet Office, Mr. Jason Webster, Honorable D. Kurt Tibbetts, former leader of government business, Honorable Speaker Mayor Lawrence, former member of the Legislative Assembly and Minister, Mr. Gilbert McLean. And before we go to Mr. Tibbetts, Mr. McLean has to leave us. I just want to extend our thanks to him and give him an opportunity for some closing comments before he leaves. When he leaves, Mr. Vaughn Carter, the chairperson of the Cayman Islands Constitutional Commission, will join us also. Mr. McLean.
Well, thank you, O.C., and thank you for the opportunity of being here, and I also wish to thank Mr. Fonzo Wright. I think it has been an excellent occasion here this morning, and it continues. And definitely, I think the rest of this roundtable it couldn't be in better hands. So I hope that there are people listening now as well and learning from what has been said. And there was one thing before I go that Sterling Ebanks brought to your attention, and that was the question to him of whether we were part of Jamaica.
Yes.
You had it on your laptop there, but I actually wrote it down because I'm going to try to memorize this because I've had some disagreements and arguments with people about this.
Yes.
And it was by the Earl of Perth on the 11th of May, 1958. And it reads, "The Cayman Islands do not have to be formally separated from Jamaica, for by the Act of 1863, they are administered, quote, as if they were part of, end quote, Jamaica. On the other hand, the Turks and Caicos Islands were, in the words of the Order in Council of 1873, quote, annexed to and formed part of, end quote, Jamaica."
Okay.
So there's the difference.
Thank you very much. Godspeed.
Thank you.
To you as well.
Well, you know that when the Treaty of Madrid was given, and they gave the Jamaica trade, the Spanish traded Jamaica to the British, and they said those little islands, but they didn't call us by name. They didn't think we were significant enough. We were Las Tortugas then, but nobody called us by name. They just shipped us off.
Yep. Mr. Honorable D. Kurtivitz, we've come a long way, baby, since 1972 to 2009. You were part of that machinery at that point in time. Want you to give our listeners and our viewers a little cursory glance into the thinking and the momentum behind a new constitution for the Cayman Islands.
Take care, Gilbert. Thank you, Orrett. Just again, because time is limited, I'm going to try to put everything as briefly as I possibly can. After the 2005 elections, well, let me go back a little bit. The government who took over in 2005, when we were on the campaign trail, one of the planks that we were campaigning on was the fact that we would modernize our constitution and get a new constitution during that term if we were elected. We were elected, so that was a mandate as far as we were concerned to get a new constitution. So we just timed it rightly so that when Jason started working his first day at working with the government on March the 13th, 2007, the constitutional review process officially began. There was a constitutional secretariat. I think Suzanne.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say Webb, but but I was going back 2 generations. Suzanne Bothwell, she was much younger than she is now, but certainly that was one of the best training sessions she ever had, and it has done well for her, as you can see where her career has gone. She did a sterling job there. We started off by going out to the public and holding meetings, seeking their input. During the same time, we sought to bring in speakers who were familiar with the process. I can remember specifically, God rest his soul, David Thompson, former Prime Minister of Barbados. He came in and he was happy to come, and he spoke up at the Mayor Miller Hall, I think. That was just one of the speakers that we brought in, outside of the district meetings that were being held. And we also considered it extremely important to document all that we had. So there were several publications which were produced and handed out to the public throughout the islands. There is a sequence of them which I won't go through, but what they all did was, as we continued the process, they all outlined, each of these publications outlined where we were at and what we thought at the time consensus was based on all of the public input on the various issues.
If I can interrupt you for a second before we lose train of thought. One of our listeners shared this with me this morning. So there are people who have a great interest in this and have documented it and made their folders in relation to constitutional modernization and all of the documents that you speak about
exactly.
As well, Mr. Tibbetts.
That cover page that you were showing me is from the document which, because that cover page, what they're using it for is all of it.
Yes.
But that publication was entitled The Revised Proposals
Yes, yes.
for Constitutional Modernization. That's why you see that area is cut out up top.
Okay, yes.
But nothing wrong with that to suit the occasion.
Comic book that was put out.
Yes,
past, present, and future.
Yeah.
I got them all. So
Okay, yeah, but just saying, the whole purpose of that exercise was to try to keep people abreast so they didn't lose their way in the process and be confused as to where we were at, because we also recognized, that there are some people who will just not let go. We also recognize that when you and you have to do it not regiment style, but when majority consensus is reached, having heard it all, you can't just listen to what a few minority people are clinging on to and not move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided this was the best way to make sure that everybody knew where we were at, and it worked.
And it was the first time that it had ever taken that
it ever
course.
happened in that manner.
Yes.
Yeah. And the truth is, I have to say, and I firmly believe this, I was a leader of government business at that time, and I did everything to ensure that everything was as open as possible, because I never took any position that it had to be this way.
Mm-hmm.
It was certainly going to be decided on by the will of the people and on their volition. But what we also recognized was people could have been led astray by others.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to make sure that the people, whenever the time came for them to make up their minds, that they were coming from the most informed position that they could be at when they had to go to the polls, which was in May of 2009.
What was the reaction of the UK government to the approach that you took?
I was coming to that.
Okay.
You're too anxious.
I just have to do my job as a moderator.
Yeah, that's fine. But just to say to you, Orrett, and you will remember him, in fact, Mr. Ian Hendry was who the UK government decided to be their chief negotiator.
Yes.
And it's funny, I mentioned his name. I have to pay accolades, believe it or not, coming from Kurt Tibbetts to an Englishman, because Ian was as fair as I could have expected throughout the process. You were there,
yes,
and I couldn't ask for any more or any better, I should say. But it's so funny. He has retired now, but even after his retirement, any discussions that the Cayman Islands government, whichever government it is, has had since then, they have called him back to talk to Cayman about any constitutional change that we may desire. That tells you how they value him.
And his institutional memory also. Yes.
And the feeling was mutual. So that in itself bodes well for anything that's happening now or in the near future with regards to discussions of any other constitutional changes. So when we spoke to them about the process that we wanted to use, they were very, very receptive. In fact, they were shocked because they thought that you would just get a team of people come in and we said, no, we don't want anything like that. And really, I didn't want that to be any part of a legacy that I would have left behind. So, and we got through it. It's funny, that government led by myself lost the majority in the 2009 in the 2009 election,
and the referendum carried.
But the referendum to vote for the new constitution was voted for almost 2-1.
Yes,
it was 60-something% to 30-something%. I think 62 to 38 or something like that. So,
if I can ask about the thinking that went behind having the discussions. Not only in the UK, where sometimes you're intimidated. Okay, let's take a commercial break, and then we can come to that. Folks, please stay tuned. I'm sort of preempting Minister Tibbetts. We think alike because we've been through the process together as well.
Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for the 7 a.m. news, brought to you by Cayman National Bank, proudly serving the Cayman Islands since 1974. Visit Cayman National Bank today for all of your financial needs.
Do you have a customer shutoff valve installed? The customer shutoff valve enables you to turn off the water between the meter and your property. In the event that you have to evacuate your property, Turning off the valve can prevent unexpectedly high water bills and property damage should a leak occur in your property's plumbing. For more useful hurricane preparedness tips, visit the Water Authority's website at www.waterauthority.ky or follow us on social media.
The following is a special announcement from the Cayman Islands Civil Service Association.
It's that time again. SIXA Back to School Member Backpack and School Supplies Distribution will take place July 8th to the 12th, daily from 1 to 7 p.m. in Grand Cayman at the SIXA office located on the second floor of the Hospital Road Plaza above number 1 shoe shop.
And July 13th in Cayman Brac from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. at the Aston Ready Civic Center Medical Wing.
Members, you are being asked to kindly bring identification, and if you are collecting bags on behalf of another member, please bring a written signed note from that member with a copy of their ID as well. Remember, SIXA Members Backpack Distribution, July 8th to the 12th, daily from 1 to 7 p.m. in Grand Cayman at the SIXA office located on the second floor of the Hospital Road Plaza above number 1 shoe shop.
July 13th in Cayman Brac, 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. at the Aston Ready Civic Center Medical Wing. And to quote Anthony D'Angelo, develop a passion for learning. If you do, you will never cease to grow.
Sometimes having a middleman is not a bad thing, especially when it comes to insurance. Do you know that when it comes to cost, ease, speed, and peace of mind, insurance brokers ranked higher than when customers buy direct? So, for all your insurance needs, call Fidelity Insurance. We're the middleman you want. Call us today at 949-7822. Fidelity. We're good for you.
Shaken yet standing firm. This is Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Good afternoon and welcome back to this special edition of Talk Today. The 4th of July 2019, we're celebrating 60 years of Constitution in the Cayman Islands. This is a round table, this written constitution. Yes. We talked about that this morning also, right? And around the table we have Dr. Steve McFeel, Mr. Jason Webster, the Honorable D. Kurt Tibbetts, the Honorable Mary Lawrence, and also with us is Mr. Vaughn Carter, who is the chairman of the Constitutional Commission, and we will give him a separate introduction a little bit later on because some of our other guests have a time limit that they have to leave as well. So we're going to take the mic back over to Mr. Tibbetts, and we're still not taking any calls at this point in time. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Orrett. Glad you reminded me of one point there that we have to mention also. The UK, I say this not to make any disparaging remarks, but the UK by nature are not very keen on making public these types of discussions, not just with the Cayman Islands, with all of the overseas territories. But in speaking to Ian Hendry, I thought it best that not only we should have the meetings and what took place during the meetings in the UK recorded, but also to be made public. We had to lean a little bit, not too much. I was a bit heavier then too, but we leaned for a while, and they acceded to the request, and I thought that was a good milestone from the beginning, so that we wouldn't have any naysayers coming out saying what they're doing behind the scenes, and you know how these things can go. And that was not about protecting ourselves, but it was about protecting the people, to ensure that the people were fully informed as to exactly what was taking place and the whole process. And I was grateful. At the end of the day, Ian Hendry himself said to me, I don't have this authority, but I'm going to go and I'm going to do the best I can. And when he came back and said yes, I was very grateful, to be very honest, because what that also did, that set the stage for the other UK territories, UK overseas territories, forgive me. And I'm not so sure if every one of them took advantage of that, but they then had us leading the way, leading the charge with that, so they were able to do so if if they so desired. I didn't follow up, to be honest, in all of the processes. Jason, you might be able to say that, but I know they had the ability to do so after that.
President was set.
I mean, most of the overseas territories have an updated or modernized constitution. I believe the only one that's still without one is Anguilla.
Anguilla.
Yes. So since 2009, the rest have gone that way and have updated their constitutions.
But at the meetings, have they publicized all of the information that was?
To the best of my knowledge, no.
Mm-hmm.
So we were still the only ones who did it, but that's fine. And
Mr. Webster, while you still have the mic, talk to our listeners and our viewers about access to those verbatim discussions that were held at those meetings.
Well, after the 2009 Constitution came into effect, I actually moved over and helped establish the Constitutional Commission.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, we got the final approval to publish them, and I believe they were on the website for the Constitutional Commission, if they're not still there.
They are still there.
Yes. Well, so you can access that at their website.
www.constitutionalcommission.ky.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
And I have used it on my show just so that people can know exactly what was said, what people's sentiments were at that point in time. As a matter of fact, Dr. McField, just last week we used it in relation to the advisory district councils and standards in public life, as well, because we believe that some of the lawmakers reneged on their promises that they made then. Anyway, Mr. Tibbetts,
just quickly, and then I'm going to ask you a question, so
sure.
you prepare your little self there. Two things that stood out for me from the very onset, even before we had a final document, were the fact that we were going to be able to have a Bill of Rights in our Constitution. I think even today, most of us might take that for granted. But up to that point in time, it was something that totally eluded us.
Yeah, we just talked about it.
Yeah, forgive me, but I'm just saying it. And,
yes, no, you're
that
right.
That to me was a milestone. Also, the fact we called it a preamble, but the affirmation before the actual Constitution itself, with all of those bullet points without going into those things. That also set the stage to tell the rest of the world, whoever looks at our Constitution, listen, we can't swear for every single soul in our country. We can't swear for every single citizen. But we can tell you this is what we aspire to be as a country. And I thought that was extremely important. The one fact that I also want to speak, when I mention Ian Henry's name, is, and you, Jason, both of you may remember, well, you remember this, I'm sure. He always, even when, because I think we went to the UK twice and they came here twice.
No, we went once.
We went in February. We went in February.
Yes, the first two twice.
They came here twice and we went there once.
Yeah,
that's how it went.
February of 2009.
Right. But whether it was there across the pond or whether it was here in Grand Cayman, he kept saying whenever we got into a sticky point, and I realized in short order what he was making sure happened. Whenever we had differences within our own camp, for instance, not even with if we were unified and the UK had a difference with us, he kept insisting. He said, gentlemen and ladies. He never ever said ladies and gentlemen. I don't know why, but I guess it was because there were more gentlemen than ladies there. But he said, gentlemen and ladies, remember, nothing is finished until all is finished.
Yes.
So what the point that he was making there was, listen, whatever we come across that is not sorted right away, remember, even what we think we have sorted, that's still on the table. That's not done and dusted.
Yes.
And I think it was his way of saying to us, listen, whatever you come across, let's find a way to get past it, because otherwise you're going to lose all that you had, which is so important that you don't want to touch again. And eventually everybody bought into that. So whenever as is expected, we got into these sticky points, We stayed with it till we found the middle ground and the compromise, which even on occasion we realized some of it was a bit of politics. But rather than risk certain other things, we did our best to compromise to the benefit of the country as best we could. Because I have to tell you, never did, never will try to purport that this 2009 Constitution is the best Constitution that we could have had. But what I can say with hand on heart, it is the best that those of us who were there could get. Let's put it that way. And for various reasons. And I do believe that the shortcomings that some of us saw in it were not that detrimental that you wanted to chuck away the whole thing. It wasn't anywhere near that. In fact, I think the vast majority of the changes that we accomplished in the Constitution really made a huge difference in the framework of how the country is governed today. So I believe, all in all, while there will be continuous need to revise what we have, whether it's in simple form or after a certain period of time to do a full all-round revision, that what we have today is a workable framework, and I think by and large it has done well for the country since then.
Okay, I have a question for you.
I haven't finished with you yet.
Yeah, okay,
but go ahead.
There were several occasions when Ian Henry would there were points that were raised, being discussed, and he said, "I'd have to get back to you on this one. I have to talk to the minister and see what the minister says in relation to this." And remember, there were changes in ministers during that period of time. The changing between Bellingham and the lady minister, what was it, Baroness Simons?
Yep.
No.
Scotland?
No.
It was a younger MP.
Younger MP. I'll get her name soon. But I got the impression that Ian had more authority in terms of agreeing to things than he made us believe. Because there were times when he said, "I'll get back to you," and before the end of the day, he had gotten to the minister without even leaving the room and come back with an answer.
You are very perceptive. You are very perceptive. He may not have had written authority, but he was given license.
Yes.
He didn't tell me this. That would not be truthful of me.
Yeah.
But everything in me told me that, based on the observations, just like what you're talking about, and a few other things. What I can tell you that he used to do, that I never ever told anybody, but it's all over now. He used to use someone else to contact somebody else that was supposedly a fire. But again, I suspect he just wanted it cleared. He wasn't asking. He just said, "Listen, we just want to make sure you're okay with this."
Yes.
And I guess that's because of the chain of command. But to me, how I saw it then was that was the type of license that he had because they trusted him. And if you notice, the other overseas territories, by and large, have tried to latch on to him too, because we said loud and clear, not to please him, but that we consider the whole operation to be one that was fair, and nothing was attempted to be shoved down our throats, which at that time we were expecting, to be very honest with you. And we had all kinds of trepidations, but there you go.
Very, very quickly, the advantage of having Sir Jeffrey Joel on our team.
Sir Jeffrey was a godsend. Our Premier now, Premier McLaughlin, who was Minister of Education at the time, was the lawyer in our camp, the resident lawyer in our camp, and I have to today, again, pay accolades to Premier McLaughlin, because he was very instrumental in a lot of those things, and he was very perceptive, and he applied himself totally and dedicated himself to the process. But Sir Geoffrey, from whence he cometh, was in itself an advantage. I can't remember, some stone or the other. What the place name?
Blackstone Chambers.
Blackstone Chambers.
Yes, uh-huh.
I'm not legally inclined. So he was in the know with a lot of things, and besides that, being very astute and knowledgeable, at the end of the day, he was very helpful to us. What would have taken us long time to figure out, he could just grab onto it and say, fellas, so and so and so.
And he was involved with the South African Constitution and the Constitution of
he had a lot of experience.
Well.
Yes. He was very helpful. And again, how we came by him was through the Ministry of Education at the time when he came down here, because he was very familiar with when we were looking at systems. Mm-hmm. And you were not where you are now. You were in the Ministry of Education at the time.
So familiar with those discussions. But what's interesting, I think, about Professor Jowl is that he had actually been engaged previously by the prior administration. So when the new administration came in and were pushing the constitutional modernisation process, they took on that advisor. They didn't throw away the baby with the bathwater, as it were. And it's indicative, I think, of what Mr. Tibbetts says, that this was an inclusive process, trying to get as many people involved with the process as possible, and to move the process forward in the interest of the country as a whole.
Yes.
I want to ask you one question, because I think I'm just about done here.
I just have a question to ask you too.
Me? Oh my God.
Okay, let me have Dr. Steve.
Yes. You want last, okay.
Yeah.
No problem.
Mr. Tibbetts, I just want to ask you the question. Was there any substantive discussion surrounding the definition of what a Caymanian is? Because I noticed that it's not in the Constitution, and it is vague, because it says a Caymanian is what the immigration law says it is, and the immigration law says a Caymanian is a person who has Caymanian status. Was there any narrative about that? Was there any discussions about that particular subjects?
Okay, I'm going to have you answer that. We have to take a commercial break. When we return, Mr. Tibbetts, we will have that answer for Dr. Steve McField. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly.
Radio Cayman. Radio Cayman's newsroom. These are the biggest stories right now.
With your latest headlines, I'm April Cummings. Shortly after 7 this morning, officers responded to a traffic collision on Batabanu Road near the intersection of Esterly Tibbetts Highway, involving a van and a bicycle, which resulted in the van overturning. Police say the cyclist was taken to the Cayman Islands Hospital to be treated for non-life-threatening injuries, while the driver of the van suffered minor injuries. In international news, a 6.4 magnitude earthquake struck Southern California today, the largest trembler to hit the region in decades. The quake was centered in Searles Valley, a remote area of San Bernardino about 100 miles away from Los Angeles. Authorities in Gibraltar say they have an Iranian supertanker believed to be breaching European Union sanctions by carrying a shipment of Tehran's crude oil to war-ravaged Syria. A senior Spanish official said today the operation was requested by the United States. Iran's state-run news agency described the incident as an illegal seizure of an Iranian oil tanker. Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Pope Francis for substantive talks at the Vatican today and thanked the pontiff for discussions on a wide range of topics, including Ukraine and the Catholic Church in Russia. Pope Francis received Putin in an hour-long audience at the Vatican Apostolic Palace. Those are your headlines. From Radio Cayman's newsroom, I'm April Cummings.
Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands. What's happening in your community? News and information, music and more. You can find us. www.radiocayman.gov.ky. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Radio Cayman is your choice, your voice for today's biggest news. Radio Cayman.
a caring and community spirit, cherished family and cultural values. These are some of the things that still embodies the Caymanian way of life in the Eastern Districts today. Savannah Pharmacy, your neighborhood pharmacy, located in Countryside Shopping Village, is delighted to offer products and services of real value. Whether it's catering to your family's medical needs or carrying apparel, gifts, and beauty products, Savannah Pharmacy provides you with more than just prescriptions. Remember, they're always just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours, including Sundays and holidays. Savannah Pharmacy. For more information, call 946-3336.
RC Fusion, featuring Billboard pop hit songs and more from the 70s to the 90s.
RC Fusion.
Weekdays from 10 a.m. till 12. RC Fusion.
Brought to you by Nathan General Maintenance and Construction. You break it, they fix it. Call the General for a free quote. 917-7586.
RC Fusion.
Excuse me, I noticed you from afar.
Really? Me?
Well, not you. The KFC sandwich you're eating.
Oh, Zinger.
Sorry, I'm not trying to be funny.
No, it's called the Zinger Sandwich. Crunchy, juicy, 100% chicken breast, crisp lettuce, sweet mayo on a seeded bun with a little zing. KFC's chicken is not factory breaded, frozen and refried like the Burger Boys. Customize your KFC Zinger and dip it in barbecue sauce.
Wow, now I'm starting to notice you too.
KFC, it's finger-licking good.
Shaken yet standing firm. This is Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Good afternoon and welcome back to this special edition of Talk Today, roundtable discussion on constitutions of the Cayman Islands. And around the table, Dr. Steve Macfield, Mr. Jason Webster, Honorable D. Kurt Tibbetts, Honorable Mayor Lawrence, Mr. Vaughn Carter, the chairperson of the Cayman Islands Constitution Commission. And Dr. Macfield posed a question to Mr. Tibbetts in relation to the absence of a definition of Caymanian in the Constitution other than referring to the definition that is in our immigration law.
Well, just to answer that as quickly as I possibly can, those discussions actually took place in London. And we had a few problems why we didn't arrive at anything in writing or inscribed in the Constitution. It was not, in fact, it was almost impossible for the team representing Cayman, which consisted of NGOs, opposition members, government members. We could not gain consensus as to what that should be to be able to put it forward. And there was also the question at hand, because when you have a constitution and you have a completed and a finished product, given the fact that we are a UK overseas territory or British overseas territory, it is not easy for us to get a constitution changed once that's been done by order in council and all and done and dusted. So we also had that question saying, what if we're not doing justice and new things came about and you wanted to change the definition? How difficult would it be to get that changed or revised it or anything like that? Whereas what's in the law, whoever the government of the day is, who represents the majority of the people, can go to the Legislative Assembly and make those changes. And I think that's why it ended up like that.
Okay.
Like
I think you had a question for me,
Yes,
sir?
I had a question. It's a very simple question,
sure.
and it's not loaded or anything.
Oh, no.
But because you were there throughout the process, and not because I want to say this just to please you, but I want to tell the public that you were, as the Cabinet Secretary, as conscientious a Cabinet Secretary as the government could have asked for also.
Thank you
because
very much. Thank you.
I mean that you were in the thick of everything, not trying to be somebody, but you were simply there making sure that you were cognizant of everything that was happening, and if anything was being missed by anybody, you were the first person to point it out. And I will always respect that. There must have been something specific which was the most striking to your mind of that whole affair. I know. Tell me if there were more than one. That's fine. I'm just curious about that.
There were several. What was striking to me at that point was the.
By the way, audience, we did not rehearse this. Go ahead.
The willingness of the UK to engage in the dialogue, and I do firmly believe that we probably would have gained a little bit more traction, got a little bit more in terms of what we wanted if we had pressed a little bit harder. But even those things that they did give up at the end of the day, I found that to be really striking, extremely striking. And as far as the process is concerned, I'm extremely proud of the fact the way that it was handled, the way that we took it to the people, the way, despite the complaints of the opposition in terms of being strapped financially, not being able to put their position forward, the opportunity that was given for everyone to participate in it. I think that set a template, a new template for constitutional discussions.
The one comment I would have to give on your answer to me is, like most other things, when it's all over, you can go back and say,
yes,
well, so and so and so.
yeah.
But while it's happening,
yes.
got to score.
It's 2020.
You got to score your goal while you're playing the game.
Well, Mr. Tibbetts, I know you have to go now. I want to thank you very much and providing that insight. I'm sure that the public is, highly appreciative of that as well. Mr. Jason, you're going to be leaving us, as well.
Yes, sir.
And that gives me an opportunity to introduce Mr.
Vaughn. Before you introduce Vaughn,
yeah.
just want to quickly say as I leave that in listening to the panel, yourself, Madam Speaker, Gilbert, and Steve, I can tell you, I really mean this, you could not have had a better group of panelists to bring all of this information to the public regarding the constitutional journey that the Cayman Islands has been on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I just want to say this to you, sir. I want to thank your party, your committee, whoever, for selecting Mr. Alfonso Wright to
head up
the celebrations and bring this journey. What I would like to ask you to use your influence to try to get a lot of this written down, so that it can be passed on and it can go into the schools. Dr. Lawrence, Honourable Madam Speaker, myself, Mr. Roy Bodden, Gilbert McLean.
I forgot to mention Roy's name since he wasn't there when I came, but Roy too. Roy too.
We volunteered to put it together. Each one of us would write a part that we were expertise in. If the government would give us a grant to do so. And I want you to think about that, sir.
I just want to make sure I understand.
Yes.
Give you a grant to
put all of this in writing.
Constitutional history of the Cayman Islands.
Yeah, I understand.
The history of the development of the Cayman Constitution.
So I'm with all of that, and I just want to make sure that I got it clear. By the way, I don't have the influence you think that I do. but outside of that.
Yeah, more than you think.
You're still a grandfather of the party.
But let me just say, when you say give you a grant,
yes, it was all to us together to put it together.
Understand. Yeah. What I think would get the results quicker is if everything is not just that, but if everything is handled through Alfonso, and rather, if you understand what I'm saying,
yes.
then you have a concerted chain of command that can be accountable, and I think once that happens, then. So I'll have a word with Alfonso first, and then I'll say a big prayer to the big man upstairs and see who else I need to go to. How's that?
Thank you. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much as well. Okay. Ms. Susan, we still have one more commercial break to take. Okay. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Mr. Vaughn Carter, who's the chairperson of the Cayman Islands Constitutional Commission, and they have done quite a job as well, and the Constitutional Commission is part and parcel of our Constitution as well. There are provisions in our Constitution for a constitutional commission to be established. Tell our listeners and our viewers about the Constitutional Commission, your role, and then we'll talk more about our current Constitution. We want to talk somewhat about some of the proposals, because any document that you formulate, you have passed, when you start to work with it, that is when you actually start to see, some of the flaws, some of the shortcomings in a particular document. And I know that your commission has made some recommendations in terms of amendments. And we have seen some challenges already, even in the courts, in relation to some provisions of our Constitution as well. Mr. Carter, good afternoon. Welcome to this special edition.
Good afternoon, Mr. Connor, and good afternoon, fellow panellists. Yes. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. The Constitutional Commission is indeed a creature of the 2009 Constitution. It features, along with several other commissions, as one of the institutions supporting democracy that have been included in the Constitution in order to support the development of civic society and of the Constitution itself. The Commission differs from some of the previous constitutional commissions that listeners will have heard about earlier on in the day, and certain persons being appointed by the UK, coming from the UK, or even more recently the three Caymanian constitutional commissions that looked at the Constitution in the early 2000s, in that they were all established, those commissions were all established with a specific purpose, most likely the update of the constitutional arrangements at that time. The current Constitutional Commission, created by the 2009 Constitution, is a standing commission. So it doesn't have its eye necessarily and always just on a specific goal of changing or updating the Constitution. The I think primary objective, therefore, of this commission is education. Education and getting people involved with the Constitution and understanding the Constitution. And to that end, this morning, this day, and these celebrations and the previous weekend have been absolutely phenomenal. This is precisely what we need to be doing. If we don't have the engagement, if we don't have the discussion, we can't have the informed debate on the strengths and weaknesses of the current document, and whether or not we feel it's necessary to change that or update that in due course. So, as you know, I come from an education background, and for me, education is the absolute key to everything. And Dr. McField was right in the proposition that he just put to Mr. Tibbets. Yes. It's these types of discussions, this history needs to be recorded, it needs to be put down, and it needs to be accessible to everybody. One of the things that the Commission has done is to try to draw together as much documentation as there is on the Cayman Islands Constitution and bring it together in one depository so that people can access. But we readily admit there needs to be more. I heard the discussion this morning going back to 1832 and that type of information. We were fortunate to be able to draw upon the work of the Modernisation Secretariat and copy that and put that onto our website. But there are gaps there. We try to add to that. One of the things I would love to see is if we could pull all of that together. And I've talked to Dr. McField previously about the idea of oral histories and getting people who are in the debates to actually, and in the discussions, to record that. We could bring that all together. We get a central depository that it is actually comprehensive. And then one of the things we've also tried to do is reach out to the schools and to the Education Ministry to say, can we include the Constitution and in some form of civics education that is part of our curriculum? And there's a curriculum review at the moment, and I hope that we can get back in contact with them and discuss that. But sometimes the response that we've got is, well, could you come down and give a lecture? And yes, I mean, I give a lecture at the law school every year talking about the 1832 Constitution for Legislative Assembly, for example. But that's not good enough. there's no sustainability to that. We need the resources, and we probably could then do some work around the resources and sort of index it and make that accessible to anybody that then wants to deliver courses on the education, on the Constitution. So education, documentation, support, organise that and focus that. That's what the Commission is about, and that's what it's trying to do.
Okay. And any questions for Mr. Carter?
Yeah, Mr. Carter. There were some, I think, 33 amendments, recommendations for amendment to the present Constitution. I think we discussed them last year. Mr. Connor, wasn't that right? I think the amendments.
Yes.
I think with 33 amendments.
Yes, we on one of my shows, yes, we did that.
What I would like to ask you is that, how do you go about getting those amendments realized? What does the Commission do to get the appropriate, the relevant institution, the relevant people relevant to getting those amendments in place? Because they were quite substantial amendments, and they were quite important to get done. And I wonder, what's the approach? How we expect to get those amendments in place?
Yeah, I mean, one example would be, for instance, the qualification for elected membership and how a person is disqualified. We saw that challenge being presented to the courts.
I was involved in that myself.
Excellent opportunity for us to have it clarified, have the language that is clear enough to say exactly what we mean in the Constitution. Indeed. But there has been reluctance to do it.
So let me address Dr. McField's question first by distinguishing what he referred to as 33 amendments from the current debate about modernising the Constitution.
Yes.
There are two distinct processes. There's some overlap with some of the content, and I no doubt we'll come on to talk about some of the issues that are currently on the table. But to directly respond to the 33 revisions that were proposed by the Constitutional Commission, actually before I was part of the Commission, and under the chairmanship of Mr. David Rich, my predecessor, the Commission, 4 or 5 years probably into the new Constitution, the 2009 Constitution, decided that it was time probably to have a little look at this and take stock. As Mr. Tibbetts explained, it's not a perfect document. It was never going to be a perfect document. There were compromises. And once we're working with that document, when I say we, I mean the country as a whole, inevitably there are going to be issues that arise in due course. Ms. Connor, you're quite right. Qualifications for membership of the Legislative Assembly is indeed one of them. So what the Commission did was to take some time to consider these and no doubt to talk to people and to gather that information. And as a result of that, 33 amendments or areas for amendment were proposed. That was a lot of work there, as you rightly recognise, and a lot of detail in those recommendations. It's unclear, or the process by which the Constitution is going to be changed is not set out. It's unclear. In the 2009 Constitution, there was some provision in a covering letter that dealt with minor amendments and that they could be advanced by the Premier together with the Leader of the Opposition.
Yes.
So I think the Commission probably took its cue from that and wrote collectively to His Excellency the Governor at the time, to the Honourable Premier and to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, trying to get some traction on those issues. I think that it's fair to say, in direct answer to your question, that there wasn't really much traction on those 33 amendments at that time. I can hypothesise as to why that was, and I share that with listeners purely as a hypothesis,
Sure.
which is, I think, that there was a sense that the 2009 Constitution was the culmination of a process. Finally we got some change to the 72, substantive change to the 72 arrangements. We'd been going at this since 1999 and the white paper issued by the British government on progress and prosperity. That really was the kick-off from this. I remember in 1999 being involved with the Chamber of Commerce on constitutional education and their working group in connection with that. It really took a process of 10 years from 1999, latterly with the modernisation process that Mr. Tibbetts referred to get to the 2009 Constitution. And I'm not sure that immediately there was the appetite for further change. And I think at the same time there was a feeling that, despite what you say, that they one could have pushed further, that the UK probably had gone as far as one thought that they were prepared to go. And there was this sense of, we're not going to condone another Bermuda example. If you want to go any further, there's got to be some commitment to independence and these types of things. So I think for those reasons, proposals were made. But the powers that be didn't really want to take them forward at that time for those reasons.
But if I may interrupt you, at their convenience for other issues, they went ahead and made amendments to the Constitution, the administering power.
You're referring to the amendment to the 2009 Constitution?
Yes. Yes. So there was an appetite to a certain extent.
From the Constitutional Commission's perspective, I can only advise you that the Commission was not consulted on that amendment. So notwithstanding that the Commission is a constitutional body, its powers are largely educational and to respond when asked.
Yes.
I think that most people would have anticipated that the Commission would have been consulted. We weren't, so I can't really comment on the process. And it was before my time as a member on the process that then ensued. What the Commission did do subsequently was to write to the persons that I previously identified, saying that this amendment has been made. We haven't been consulted, but we are available and ready to be consulted on any changes that may come in due course. And in fairness, in more recent times, as we've moved on to the possibility of some further amendments, the Commission was consulted on those, and as you point out, wrote a paper by way of response, which I can talk about in due course.
Yes.
Well, we talk about their reluctance on, to deal with this, but we have to also remember that circumstances affect what happens to us here. We had the Ivan hurricane. We had a change of government. We had a removal of a government. We had all of the new we had the financial crisis that we had here. Some from the world, some from our own making. We had new legislation that had to be put in place. Every piece of legislation in the country had to be brought in line with the Constitution. There was just so much for people to absorb. We had the commissions that we had never done before. People didn't understand the reason for them. And we still haven't got all of them in place that we should have in place. The documentation and stuff to go with it, legislation to go with it. So there was an awful lot to deal with following the acceptance of the 2009 Constitution. We got an entirely new form of government. We got a premier. We got a cabinet. We took the vote from the government officials that had sat in the House. We went ahead and had the Boundaries Commission. We went ahead and we had member added to the House. All of this is a lot for a community as small as ours to accept.
Single-member constituencies and all that went along.
Particularly when they don't have too much appetite for political stuff anyway. I
think you're right. There was an awful lot going on, but that doesn't discount the fact that there may be merit in some of those issues.
I don't know what those 30 things. I don't know what those 30 things are. But what I'm saying is, when we're talking about getting it done within a certain time frame, it becomes difficult when you have so many other things to deal with. The actual implementation of the 2009 Constitution was a laborious process because it changed everything that we had done before, literally. And it incorporated stuff that we'd had in constitutional changes and amendments that we had never actually put into place. You know, they were there, but we had never actually used them.
Okay, we're actually running out of time. I want to give Mr. Carter an opportunity to reflect or to look forward in terms of the way forward for the Constitutional Commission. Some of the things that you would like to achieve. What's next on the agenda for you and your members.
So building on from the 33 amendments, the fact that document is available online is a reference point for the future.
Yes.
So that's there, and that was the point I really simply wanted to make. More recently, there's been further discussion about constitutional modernisation again. Now, interestingly, that was really initiated by an event in the United Kingdom Parliament, the passage of the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2018. And it's that's provided the prompt for potential further amendments to the Constitution. Without that, I'm not sure that they would necessarily have come to the fore. For the most part, those discussions revolve around the relationship between the Cayman Islands government and the United Kingdom government, the powers of legislation locally and the powers of the United Kingdom government and indeed the United Kingdom Parliament in relation to the local powers. And a series of proposals have been put forward by the current government, and the Constitutional Commission was asked by His Excellency the Governor, the former Governor, to comment on those, to advise him really on the merits of those. And also at the same time, the Honourable Premier and the former Leader of the Opposition, Honourable Leader of the Opposition, asked the Constitutional Commission to suggest any other possible minor amendments to the Constitution. They did not envisage a massive wholesale change to the Constitution. They didn't envisage the sort of extent of the 33 amendments that had previously been put forward by the Commission, probably for some of the same reasons that Madam Speaker as alluded to just now, and probably an acceptance that there are other parts of the Constitution that still need to be implemented. The advisory district councils, the Anti-Corruption Commission. We're seeing recently the absence of legislation dealing with referenda. So there are supplementary provisions to the core document that are needed to make the core document what was anticipated. The Constitutional Commission responded to the invitation of the Governor, largely in support of the amendments to the Constitution that would protect the local legislature and the local government from constitutional overreach by the United Kingdom. We could probably do a whole show, and I know you've done a whole show on all of those issues. But I think it's suffice to say that the Commission's report, which is available online at www.constitutionalcommission.ky, supports those principles. As regards additional changes to the Constitution, the approach adopted by the Constitutional Commission in light of what happened previously with the 33 suggested amendments was to take a more holistic approach and to look at this and say, in what are now interceding 10 years, what areas of the Constitution have given rise to some confusion? So the Commission didn't take a view on this was right or this is wrong. In line with its constitutional mandate and its education mandate, it really wanted to identify issues and put them out there. And the Commission identified 6 such issues which perhaps ought to be considered because they've given rise to some confusion. And very briefly, they were the role of councillors in our Constitution. It's useful and important, I think, that backbench MPs are given roles, and we have such a lot to do in government, and it's useful for them to participate actively, but it would be useful if this was put on a constitutional footing and basis so that everybody was clear. And
because what we have now is more than loose interpretation of the Constitution. Ms. Susan, we're going to ask you to give us about 5 more minutes, if you will. Good. Yeah, go ahead.
So very quickly, Mr. Connor, that was one worth, for that very reason, as you say, it's worth looking at, debating, discussing and clarifying if necessary. Second was the appointment of the Premier following an election.
Yes.
But in certain circumstances where whether or not an elected member stood for a political party and how that that computation is undertaken, also including whether or not the speaker stood or whether the speaker is from outside. Once again, this is not casting any aspersion on what may have happened at certain times. It's just that it was felt that there was some greater clarity could have been brought or could be brought to the process. Thirdly and fourthly, you could put these together. Qualifications for electors, particularly where somebody leaves the jurisdiction and comes back, and the time it takes them to get back on the electoral roll. We have a relatively small electorate, so if somebody is entitled to vote and loses that, but comes back and wants to get that, perhaps that should happen as quickly as possible. Disqualification of electors, particularly persons that are in prison, has been very much a live issue, and there's been debate and discussion around it. Some clarification would be useful if people incarcerated are going to vote. Now that we have single-member constituencies, where would they vote? That's an interesting discussion, because the numbers could tip certain results one way or the next. Fifthly, as you rightly point out, the elected membership and the qualifications for elected membership. We've had ongoing discussions and judgments in the courts in relation to that. They're difficult to work through for the lay person. There's been at least three judgments handed down under the current constitution, and then of course interesting judgments under the previous arrangements. They could probably benefit from a review and some consideration. And then lastly, and perhaps appropriately, the process by which the Constitution is amended. If we could bring some clarity to that and some understanding to that, I think that would help all people involved and all people in Cayman generally in getting a greater level of comfort with what is going on and how our Constitution is to evolve. I cannot say whether or not those recommendations have been put to the UK and whether or not they're part of the current debate or discussion. I don't know, but those were my Commission's responses to the invitations from Honourable Premier, Honourable Leader of the Opposition and His Excellency the Governor.
Okay. And any reaction to the Foreign Affairs, the UK's House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee proposal in relation to the extending the right to vote for people resident in the Cayman Islands and also to hold office?
I'm not speaking on behalf of my commission presently, but I think it's a matter of public note that the UK government has pushed back on that. In the spirit of discussion and in the spirit of thinking these through, it occurred to me that it's interesting to consider it in the context of the advisory district councils, and one point of discussion or one point of analysis might be the elections for the Legislative Assembly have certain qualifications for membership and have certain qualifications for participating in those elections. Are the advisory district councils intended to be something slightly different, and could they be more inclusive? And we might look at that debate or discussion in that way. As I say, I offer no viewpoint, and it certainly isn't a viewpoint of the Commission, but what I have certainly taken from today is this is an opportunity to debate and discuss.
Yes.
And that perhaps is an interesting perspective to debate and discuss.
Okay.
Because as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Carter, I was one of the people who helped draft the district council law that's been sitting on the shelf now. That it's passed, but it's not been effective. The district committees were never intended for have qualifications for their membership, for their election. It was because they're district councils and because they take in all of these domestic things in the district, roads, lanes, graveyards, parks, so all of those things. Any member who was resident in the district would have a right to be elected to the district council or to vote in the district council. It was not have a qualification where you had to be Caymanian, you had to be resident for so many years. So all of those things are for the Constitution. This is for the district council. And as we were saying before, another thing about a contention that some people in the district council, they say that they should be elected district councils. But there's no reasons why that cannot happen without even changing the law. Without them being not being advisory. Because if they are elected by the people in the district, they still can be advisory.
Yes.
To the
fact that they're elected doesn't change their
doesn't change their advisory positions.
Functions, yeah.
Functions.
Okay. We've passed our time, but I want to give Mr. Von Carter an opportunity for some closing comments, and I can't have Dr. Steve and the Honorable Speaker here for the morning and for the afternoon and not give them an opportunity for some closing comments as well. So we'll start with Mr. Carter. And
as far as the Constitutional Commission is concerned,
yes.
I'm actually probably the last man standing at the moment. My two members, Natalie Urquhart and Oliver Watler, their terms have actually lapsed. And you may well have seen the call for interest put out by His Excellency the Governor in relation to all of the commissions that are governed by our Constitution. And I would like to invite the general public to express interest in the work of all of the commissions and to put themselves forward. To participate in those commissions. I would also add that in November we will be reaching the 10th anniversary of the 2009 Constitution, and it seems to me that a perfect opportunity to reconstitute this type of forum again, and to build upon that and take this as a starting point and the momentum generated from here, and let's carry on the discussion forward. I did say to Mr. Wright that 60 years is 60 years, and 60 years and 10 sounds like an appropriate time for us to revisit.
So celebrate, come on, you hear that?
I would like to thank you for the opportunity for being here this afternoon. Thank colleagues on the panel for their insightful contributions throughout the course of the day. Hopefully we can get this recorded and put somewhere so people can access this. And I look forward to coming back and having further discussions with you in the future, sir.
Thank you very much, and we look forward to that as well. Madam Speaker.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity of being here today. I believe in discussion. I believe in putting forth your ideas and listening to what the other person has to say, whether you like what they have to say or not. I think you have to recognize that they're entitled to say their piece just like you think you're entitled to say yours. And I think that's one of the things that has hampered us with discussions. Everybody's afraid to say something for fear to offend someone or to repeat something like you were a while ago trying to get Mr. Tibbetts to say something he didn't want to say. But the fact of the matter is, it's history.
Yes.
This is who we are. This is how we came about. And everything that happens, whether we agree with it or we disagree with it, are building blocks in the history of this country and building blocks that will make a foundation for the future of this country. So it is important that all our voices are heard. And as far as education goes, sir, I have Mr. Vaughan, I have Carter, I have pushed repeatedly to have education in the schools regarding our Constitution, how our government functions, how the Parliament functions. I met children in the last couple of weeks who did not even know what a legislative assembly is. And, that's startling in a country as small as ours that these things are not common knowledge among young people. We just assume it is common knowledge, but it is not. And the way to reach them is through the schools. But the way to reach the public is through forums like this. And I think that we need to have more of them. We need to get together, and whether I like Mr. Macfield, what he says, or whether I don't like it, or whether he likes me, it doesn't really matter. We've sparred for years and years and years on political issues in this country. We need to get it out there where the people can see it, where they know it. I met someone at the airport. I went to see my grandson off, and I met someone who came up to me and said how much they had learned listening to us this morning, things that they had never known, never imagined. And I believe we need to take it, we ran through it very quickly today.
Yes.
And from 1832 to the present day, it was a very quick journey, although it might have taken all day. But there are sections along the way that we really need to sit down and dwell on and put out what really happened, so that the detail, it's all right to put a headline out, but you need to put the meat in there so the public can understand what really happened and where we're coming from.
Dr.
I
Macfield.
concur with Madam Speaker, and I have always said that history is one of the most important things in any country's educational curriculum. When I went to Canada, and I went to college, Vancouver City College, I was surprised that it was one of the things you had to do. One of the courses you had to take.
In the United States, government is required. You
Yes,
cannot graduate until you've
you
done
had
that
to
course.
take Canadian history. And that's when I really got interested in history, because it tells a story of the people that you're living with and that you have to live with every day. And it tells where they came from, how they got here, and where they expect to go. And really, I'm very disappointed that we sort of forgotten our history, or we start trying to hide it. Our history. We have a beautiful history. We have a very, very colorful history for being such a small place, and to achieve such a high standard of economic benefit in such a small time, in such a short time. Many other countries took centuries to get where we are, and we did it. And although people say we're stupid, we have no education, we're fools, but we did it in less than 50 years. Because when we started this journey under the 1959 Constitution, we didn't know that we were going to be to this point. Yes, yeah. And so, as has been said, history can be interpreted any way you want it to be interpreted. But the most important thing is to tell it and let the other person who hears it interpret the way he wants to interpret it. I believe that one of our frailties, one of the things that we're falling behind is because we don't know actually who we are. And so if you don't know who you are, you don't really have any confidence in yourself. I have a lot of confidence in myself because I know my history. I know Dr. Lawrence has the same thing, and all of my colleagues that I know, Dr. Roy Borden, Mr. Gilbert McLean, and the former
leader of government
business and premier. But then we need this to extend all the way down to the people who are coming into the school system, to have a sense of purpose, to have a sense of who they are. Our people did a tremendous job. When I look at their history, when I tell the story to people, say, how were you able to do that? So I hope that this is not the end. I hope this is not just a flash in the pan, and that we're going to wait till 2000 and the 70th anniversary. Maybe I might not be here then to tell the story of what happened between now and then. I think this is the right time and the right place now to get something concrete in our business. Because, for instance, there are all of these things that Dr. Mayor Lawrence has said about the meat of the history. What we did today is give an outline of what happened since our democracy was formed in 1831. What we need to do now is to get down to see the decision that the people made and how they affect us and how they have affected us and how they will affect us in the future. And I would hope that Mr. Alfonso right, and I thank him for putting this forum together. I think they got for once, they got the right person for the right
job.
For the right job.
Yes.
And I want to thank you for inviting me onto the forum, and I want to thank you for giving me the chance to be here and to express my feelings about our history.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Doc. And I want to thank all of our listeners and our viewers as well. I won't have any final comments. I'll have the mic again tomorrow morning. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Alfonso. God bless. Have a great evening.
Talk Today is brought to you by Fidelity Bank. For all your banking needs, visit fidelitygroup.com. Fidelity, we're good for you.
Shaken yet standing firm. This is Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.